So now, moving on to our last speaker for today, it's Michael Bibb with his recommendation. Michael, you're up.
So good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for our previous speakers. I thought they did an excellent job. This is very much continuing on a theme, following on from what Charlie was saying with how we get our information and how we can get motivated. So what I'd like to do for the next 10 or so minutes is continue this, giving you bucket loads of information, including books, films and podcast gems. First off, full disclosure, those that don't know me, I'm an 8-year Court of the Table MDRT member, and the reasons for joining MDRT was that there wasn't anything, and there's still anything quite like MDRT. As Tony Shea says in his book, Delivering Happiness, one of the key things in life for us to be successful is to sit at the right table. And for me, that's the $1 million round table. So put simply, surrounding ourselves with the right people. And I think from our previous speakers, we all know we're sat at that table. So I'm going to invite you all to welcome the following people into your heads and hearts, and please listen to as many of these podcasts as you can, and then either email me or Sarah with any takeaways and, dare I say, life-changing or life-affirming moments. Today, we're going to be looking at the High Performance podcast hosted by BT Sports' Jake Humphrey and Damian Hughes, psychologist. If you're wondering what this has to do with financial services, a little. What does it have to do with you? Everything. It's now in its 6th series. I've listened to most of the episodes and abridged the best bits for you, but there really is some great content for everyone out there. Now, whether you're a mentee, member, Court of the Table, top of the table, this is for you. As some of you know, the last couple of years, I've taken some time on top of the mountain and been perfecting my own coaching practice. And whilst we might be Court of the Table, top of the table at MDRT, if we ask ourselves, how top of the table are we in other areas of our life? And when Sandro showed that wheel of life, we might be smashing it in business. Are we high performance in our relationship? Are we as high performance in our health as Charlie, for example? So being high performance in all areas of our life, I think, is something that we can all work on. Buckle up, here goes. We're jumping into high performance. You can access these via YouTube or the podcast app on your iPhone. It's a really simple format, and I'll be sharing some of these best moments. But what I want you to do, rather than me saying, this guy was really good, that girl was really good, can you imagine that you're the guest and you're being interviewed when we throw some of these questions up? So you're welcome to throw some thoughts into the chat, or as I said, perhaps even email Sarah some of those. So the first question that they always kick off is, whoever they're interviewing, whether it's sports, business, politician, is, in your mind, what is high performance? So give yourself a moment and just think about that. What is high performance to you? And if you can, throw some thoughts into the chat. So one of the best guests for me was John Mcavoy. And ironically, at one time, he was one of the most wanted men in the UK. As a teenager, he got convicted as an armed robber. He was an A category prisoner, convicted at Belmarsh, given 26 years sentence. That was his life done. What he was able to do, though, was bring himself back from the brink, and he gives credit really to a guard who actually saw potential in him. While he was in prison, he was able to break a couple of world records. And following this Ironman theme, Charlie, John also became a professional Ironman. What he does now is he invests his time going into deprived areas, deprived schools, where the trajectory for most of those kids is a life of crime. And it's his role now just to save them from the life that he had. But one of the most powerful and, dare I say, emotional, even though he shows zero emotion up until one bit in the podcast, but it was one of the best conversations I've ever heard. So yeah, the books that he said were his handholds back to life were Nelson Mandela's Long Walk to Freedom, and also Rhonda Byrne's The Secret. So I'm sure you probably all read The Secret and you might have a view on it, but that's what he puts it down to. Next guest I'd like to bring to your attention is Mel Marshall. Now, she was on this podcast just before the Tokyo Olympics, She's the Team GB swimming coach. So the likes of Adam Peaty and all those swimmers. Adam Peaty, for those that don't know, he's the fastest man in the world in the water. Maybe just a little bit faster than Charlie. I don't know, but if Charlie's going to do sub 10:30, Adam Peaty better watch out. But yeah, this girl was brilliant. She was a former great swimmer. She got to world champion. At her Olympics in 2004, it really didn't go her way and it all fell apart. But it fell apart and made her one of the best swimming coaches in the world. One thing that I really liked about her was how humble she was with all that she's done. And bear in mind, in Tokyo, our swimmers kind of just took all the golds. They took them all home. And that's not in any small part down to her, but I think she's the heart and the brains and the gut of that operation. And a great line for you, a great line. She says, "I go to bed the expert, but wake up the student." And, you know, for someone that performs at that highest level and that kind of sense of humility and that we're always learning, for me was really powerful. Really liked Sir Ian McGeechan. He's the head coach of the British Lions. One of his classic lines was doing world-class basics, world-class basics. Oftentimes we let the basics things go because we're reaching up or reaching higher onto the next thing, but doing the basics consistently at world-class level, he put down as a secret of his success. And coming back to this question about what is high performance, I'm sure you all kind of got your business heads on and thought high performance is getting top of the table or quarter of the table or smashing the business. One of his takeaways for me was how after his first professional rugby game, his dad gave him a $5 so he could stand at the bar and buy in a round of drinks. What he learned only a couple of years later was that his dad had to walk to work the following week because that $5 was his travel money. So when we look at high performance, you know, at MDRT, and again, you've seen it this morning, it's not just about the biz, it's actually about the whole person and how we operate in every area of our life. So what I'd like you to think about is, if you are performing really high at a certain level, how are you performing as a parent? Because there's Ian McGeechan there, who's an old man himself, but he still carries the legacy of his dad that gave him a $5. This obviously isn't about throwing cash at our kids, but it's about investing in our kids, and so that our kids appreciate that investment. So have a little stew or cogitate on that with regards to defining what high performance means to you. Many of the guests, including Johnny Wilkinson, cyclist Mark Cavendish, Alistair Campbell, were all very open in this podcast about their mental health struggles. They operated on a high level, but their mental state and wrestling with depression has been a constant challenge to their careers. So I'm going to ask you that if mental health is a constant battle for high performers, what about you? What about your clients? We have to keep checking in with each other, people. It's, you know, if we learn nothing, that it's, you know, we are there and we all go beyond the money, you know, arm around the shoulder for anyone, ourselves, our team, our clients. I think if we could get that into our daily practice, it would all serve us well. Just moving slightly away from the sports people, Stephen Morgan, who's the founder of Red Row House Builders, this was a fascinating listen as he talks about starting off just digging ditches to purchasing football clubs. And now really his focus is on philanthropy, giving something like 120 million within recent years away to charity. So if successful people, when they plateau, it's all about giving it away and getting rid of it. Perhaps we need to be thinking about how we structure that into our more wealthy clients, that it's not just legacy plans for IHT, it's getting better communities, getting a better world, again, going beyond the money and to see what impact and legacy that gives for our clients and for our practice as a whole. He even talked about recessions and even the effect of the withdrawal of MIRAS, perhaps one remembered by the older advisors among us, and how that actually affected his business. So I thought it was really relevant on that. You can be an entrepreneur and you have to roll with the punches, and you either look at something as an opportunity or a threat. Mel Robbins, can we get just a show of hands for those that have read her High Five Habit book? Anyone? No? Okay. Well, she came to talk at one of the MDRTs, I think about 3 or 4 years ago. What was really interesting about this is Mel's got this book and this thing that you high five your mirror in the morning. Yeah, which I'm sure a lot of our British listeners here will be thinking, "You what? You're joking." And what was interesting is even on the podcast, there was a bit of a clash of culture because the psychologist, Damien Hughes, he was saying, "Oh, well, Mel, for the more cynical among us, high fiving, I'm really not sure that would go down. And what would you say to those people?" And basically he was saying, "I'm not going to do this because I just feel really self-conscious and a bit silly and it seems really American." And Mel's response was brilliant. She goes, "Well, what I would say to those people is, how is cynicism working out for you?"
This is absolutely fascinating, Michael. And we're going to need to wrap up the meeting very shortly. But what I really want to make sure is that we all get the opportunity to pick up on this podcast. And hopefully we've all been making notes as to some of the key interviews that have meant so much to you as well. So what I'm going to suggest is, first of all, how can we get hold of that podcast? And then secondly, in the email that we send round to everybody, we can make sure that we include the link. And if you could email me, I'll get in touch with you. Perhaps we can shortlist those speakers as well, so we can make sure that people can go straight to those episodes. So how do we get hold of the podcast?
Yeah, easily. You just put in the High Performance Podcast in YouTube, or you've got a podcast app on your iPhone. Just put in the High Performance and you'll have 6 series. You just click on which ones will be floating your